Ja, herzlich willkommen.
Well, welcome to the next panel. These days we've been talking a lot about foreign and security policy. However, it's closely linked to what Europe is comprised of within. Lars Klingbeil said that foreign policy commitment is not an end in itself, but it has a direct impact on the life on the ground. So this is also the reason why we want to take a look at both perspectives at the same time. Maja Göpel, transformation. This is your favorite topic and a very important topic when we talk about the inner strength of Europe. The transformation has not become any easier these days. We have more or less seen attempts to go backwards than forwards. But when you look at Germany and also at Europe, what can we win, so to speak, when we focus on the ecological dimension or put the ecological dimension at the heart of our actions? Oh, thank you very much. I was actually waiting for Mr. Timmermans' speech, who is a staunch supporter of the Green Deal. But I would like to take 2 steps back before I refer to this concrete question, because Lars, in your speech, you mentioned a few words that are very important, in particular when we look at the ecological dimension. Last, you mentioned see it coming. This is a very important aspect. Geopolitics is closely linked to resources and their availability. And this is why I think we are all well advised to enhance the security discussion to also comprise availability. And also Kofi Annan, for example, talked about the security of people who are free from fear and freedom from want. So I think it's very important to think about that. I mean, we have only passed our last compass in 2015 with the sustainability goals. So first, we have to point at the biggest risks for our peaceful living together, because we know that not everyone has access to sufficient food or shelter or drinking water or education in order to participate in the labor markets. But we also know how we have to rethink our industries and our infrastructures and how we should deal with our ecological system so that it can provide us with what we need today and in the future. And this brings me to the ecological tipping points. This goes far beyond the climate discussion. This is why we have to think about this circular economy. We have to incorporate the idea about the circular economy. This is also part of the Green Deal. So we have to expect certain bottlenecks, and we already see why is it so difficult to implement the energy transition? This is due to a lack of raw materials, and this is not only to do with the pandemic and China, but this will also be a question in the future. And chips, for example, that are needed for solar panels, up until what mines need to be reopened. So under mining sites that need to be reopened in order to get the necessary raw materials. So these are key points. We need to create a pull alliance which is attractive, and we should not try to incorporate other countries because we just need them. So Europe will not be able to find the necessary resources on its own ground that we need to be strong in the future as well. So this is why it's very important to be honest about the future corporations. We have to also work on the trade agreements. We have to work on our partnerships. The resources that are available resources are available in other countries, and we have to build cooperative agreements here. We have to cooperate with them. And we should prevent environmental destruction for the short-term extraction of raw materials in other countries. We have to be serious about it, and we have to be transparent. So when we form the industries and provide the technologies and reform the sectors up until the agricultural sector, then, of course, This has an impact on the regenerative resources in the future. And of course, the planet cannot replenish so quickly. We have certain regeneration cycluses, and we have to keep this in mind. This is part of our long-term security. And just the last word, this interim phase, and Gramsci is actually the thinker, which was the starting point of my doctoral thesis. And so this means we have to be courageous enough. We need clear commitments, we need clear KPIs, we need a clear and differentiated orientation going beyond our gross domestic product in terms of what do we want to achieve and where are we. So we should not only focus on the short-term improvements, we have to communicate better, we need more transparency, and this will bring us to a just transition. Well, I think some of the aspects that you have brought up will be brought up again after the input of Frans Timmermans, but you mentioned that Europe is poor in resources, and this is what we experience at the moment. The people see it in the energy prices in particular. Lars Klingbeil this morning said, well, climate protection and our economic well-being go hand in hand, and this is difficult to grasp for many people. But for the upcoming years, do we not also have to talk about a loss of economic wealth when we talk about transition? Well, I think both values are interdependent, but Lars also asked us to complement his keynote. So I would say that I feel a little bit uncomfortable in this discussion. So far, I already heard about a change in mentality, etc. But when it comes to the ecological question, we are dealing with someone with whom we cannot negotiate. And when we cannot work based on cooperation, but when we have to deter, then it's going to be difficult in the future. And as a social democrat sitting here, I do not want to question things like what if we had and how far can diplomacy go. We have two firm parameters since 2015. Maja has mentioned one. These are the global sustainability objectives, but we also have the Paris Climate Agreement, and this is applicable, this is valid before and after the barbaric war of aggression of Russia. But for the Social Democrats, this means, from my point of view, that we have to try to find out how can we, due to this geostrategic situation, come back to the more cooperative aspects, the aspect of cooperation. It seems difficult in these times, but the approach that Lars had sketched out is the first important step, that we go beyond the United Nations, we create an axis of the willing, like a climate club, like Olaf has described it, and we have to fill it with life, because one thing is for certain. The global sustainability goals and also the 2-degree Celsius or the 1.5 degrees Celsius target cannot be achieved based on confrontation of the major powers in this world. And you also brought up the planetary boundaries. They are non-negotiable and we have to accept them. But at the same time, we have to grow together so that states who have development potential, who want to achieve economic well-being, need to be able to do so. And we, as the European Union, cannot say that they have to be well advanced in terms of the other steps. So this is an approach that was not really en vogue over the past years, because sometimes the debates in our country were around the energy prices, which could not be too high. But when I look at the national level and also the European level, and looking forward to what Frans is going to say, to only focus on the emissions trading and on the emissions trading market without social mitigation tools would mean that our societies might fall apart. I'm not only talking about economic well-being, but social security. We have to think this connected to climate protection, and we have to accept the planetary boundaries that Maja said, but it's not only the planetary boundaries, it's the soil, agriculture, water. The issue of water needs to be much higher on our agenda, and social democracy is strong because we accept planetary boundaries, but at the same time, the social questions and the economic questions that we can answer as human beings need to be answered in solidarity, and this is what we need right now.
Ja, vielen Dank, Frau Göpel.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Göpel. You are one of those who usually say that we do not need an ecological and economic change, but we also need a social change. Now, Matthias has just mentioned it. We need social cohesion. We have to take along people. But how can we do this, in particular at a time where people are already reaching their limits in many areas? Well, I'm one of those, as you said. Okay. Well, I think this is a very important aspect because whoever looks at the sustainability agenda sees that the social and ecological aspects need to be thought together. And in reality, it belongs together. So we see this in the living conditions of those who are less well off, and they are usually those who agree to more pollution or are affected by more pollution. So it's very important that we get out of this trade-off discussion. Sometimes I've got the impression that it makes me nervous when we say, well, we want all this, we are all in favor of climate protection, but the Yellow Vest is so difficult to bring this together with social aspects and ecological aspects, and to just lay back and do nothing. I mean, we've done that extensively since the protests. So I've tried to get in contact with people and asked, how can we proceed? How can we go further? And it's not only about the energy prices that are rising. And Ms. Barley has already pointed it out. How can we anticipate possible new crises? And when it comes to gentrification and at the same time a reduction in the wealth tax and rising energy prices, this is not really very popular when all this comes together. So I would like to see 3 things that we stop doing, that we do see in the public realm, and that really affects large parts of society and erode the trust in policy. One is growth can be decoupled from environmental protection. There is no empirical evidence which says, well, if that says that we cannot do it. So if you say that, you can say, okay, I've read this study and this shows what we need to change structurally in order to achieve this in the future. Because otherwise we will lose out the young generation. I'm not sure how we will be able to manage this generational pact if we don't do it. And Mr. Steinmeier has once again launched such a generational debate with this service obligation. And the second aspect is the trickle-down effect. We have to get rid of that. The idea that when you provide relief at the top, no tax increase, etc., then this will actually trickle down and have an impact on everyone and be beneficial for everyone. But it's not only about the minimum wage, it's also about just wages. And of course, siphoning off the profits that were gained in the crisis is one thing, but there are also other aspects involved. If the richer parts of society have gained 40% during the crisis and the others are now dependent on social security, I mean, we have to counter that. We have to counter that in our current policies. And if the Handelsblatt, for example, says, well, the tax rate is quite high in Germany, however, we need to take a differentiated look at it because these are just average values when it comes to the wealth tax and other wealth taxes, then this is not really true. So we have to have a differentiated look at all this. And the last aspect is what's capital markets are good for society. This becomes quite clear now that this is not the case. It's not easy to map it, but the theory of efficient financial markets needs to be reviewed. We need to take a look at what is happening there, and through taxonomy and other aspects, the financial capital can help us more strongly in the future. We should no longer follow this extractive financial market model which only serves itself but no longer the real economy. So these are the three aspects where, with transparency and targeted political measures, we can increase the trust and confidence in society once again.
Ja, vielen Dank. Ich glaube, mit vielen Punkten tragen.
Thanks so much. I think you really contribute very important points, but a lot of us here are already convinced of that. But let's mention something else, the question of good jobs, just wages, because we want to approach it in a positive way. How can we do that during this transformation? Good jobs, keep good jobs, create good jobs, and also offer something to those who are left out of the system, who are left behind. So what do we have to do and protect older industries, but also allow people to enter new industries and create jobs in these newer industries? First of all, I'm very grateful that we're standing closer together with the unions, with the environmental associations. We're working on joint projects with some of them. I remember 10 years ago when we were talking about the automotive industry, they were really positioned against the environmental associations. And now the automotive industry is really espousing the ecological transformation. Otherwise, they wouldn't stand a chance. And so, again, corporation Volkswagen wouldn't sell any car if they wouldn't also, too late, but rely on electric propulsion. So I believe the transformation of the older industries, steel, metalwork, transforming them towards hydrogen power, and France has arrived. This is a project very much at the core of the European Union and beyond. Germany by itself will never be able to produce the hydrogen at the national level that we need for our industries. But that's just one aspect. Beyond that, new aspects shouldn't be neglected, also as an opportunity. Unfortunately, in the past years, we have experienced that in the solar industry and wind energy, jobs have decreased. Solar industry increased in Asia, but not here. Here it was cut back. But unfortunately, also within the renewable industries, renewable energy industries, not a lot of workers are unionized. And collective bargaining is also important in these new industries. It's also a matter of cooperation. Transformation has huge potentials and opportunities for new areas of business. And then again, and you hinted at that, people will always be afraid that they are left behind. And I think this is where it needs solidarity. There are many areas, fields of business where there is no monetary gain to be made, but the value added for society is relevant. And so I think we need a strong society that will create and maintain these jobs, because they also make sure there's cohesion. For example, jobs like in care work, climate protection, nature protection. We need to create jobs in these areas that for people who maybe cannot by themselves resist to technological progress. So I think cohesion and solidarity, they're the core values of social democracy, and I think we need to emphasize these aspects in future. In the past, we partly suffered from the fact that we saw the ecological transformation as an opposite to the future, and I think our core idea as social democrats, and I think it makes us unique with regards to others, is that we need to think this very closely together. Thanks a lot. So today we are speaking about Europe, the role Europe should play with regards to all these questions. Unfortunately, Europe still represents strong social democracies, prosperity, security, democracy. Nevertheless, a lot is being re-evaluated currently, and this is why I'm very happy that Frans Timmermans has arrived, has joined us, who's a Social Democrat and Vice President of the European Commission for the European Green Deal. Please do join us on the other stage first and foremost. We are very much looking forward to your speech and your vision on a resilient, confident and strong Europe in these times. Thanks so much.
Erstmals herzlichen Dank für die Einladung.
Thanks so much for the invitation. Martin, I'm very happy to be here. Thanks to your invitation. And I think we have a lot to discuss. A lot is happening in Germany, in Europe. The Zeitenwende, yes, I agree.
Davon ausgehen, dass diese Zeitenwende
But we should assume that this Zeitenwende will be a major challenge. Too much is confronting us at the same time. We had a lot of crises in the past, let's say, 15 years, but now we're in the midst of an industrial revolution, in the midst of a war, in the midst of a climate crisis, and in the midst of a biodiversity crisis that is often forgotten. All this together is a huge challenge. And I wonder if humanity has, in its past, already been faced with such a challenge.
in der Lage sind,
What is good
hier gut rauszukommen.
is that we do have the capacity to exit from this safely, but the bad thing is that we really cannot lose any time, and we're losing too much time right now. That is my big worry.
Erstens, wir können
First of all,
dass es unbedingt notwendig
we should not neglect that it's essential for Ukraine not to lose this war.
es einen großen militärischen Sieg
So I do not want to say that there needs to be a big military victory, but in Europe, there's a lot of arguments, not only around the freedom of a country that did not give any cause for this war, but also about what
politische Philosophie und
is going to be the dominant political philosophy and culture in the next generation. Will it be an open society based on democracy and the rule of law? Or will Putin prove that authoritarian systems are better than democracies? This is the big issue of our time. If we do not understand that, and if, as social democrats, we are not ready to draw the conclusions from this, then I fear we will enter a new era in Europe where autocrats can say, well, it's working better here, actually. And yes, that means that citizens will have to renounce some freedoms, but we give back something, dominance, power, and so on. So, dear friends, we should not forget that a lot is at stake, much more than just Ukraine defending itself against an aggressor. It's very much related to our notion of an open society, democracy, and the rule of law. Look at what Putin is aggressing. And of course, in our society, there are also some people in all member states in Europe, and they're hiding under the table right now. These are the friends of Putin.
die sich verunschuldigt haben und die gesagt haben, wir haben
But I did not see many of them admitting that they were wrong. Most of those former friends, they're just hiding themselves. But if Putin wins, then they will get back and they will say again, Putin is a role model and we should do it alike. So these voices are very subtle right now, but they're still there. And these are and remain our political adversaries because they have a different idea of an open society and democracy and the rule of law. And they also deny our challenges nowadays, climate crisis, biodiversity crisis, and so on, and they pretend it was just a funny game. And I'm very happy that you just mentioned it, actually. We cannot allow ourselves to create a division between social policies and ecological policies. For us, this is a trap, and this trap is wide open, and we see it. We see it on the right-wing side that say all these climate measures led to the detriment of the poor people, of industries, and so on. But it's very clear that if we do not transform our industries and create a circular economy, if we do not do this now, if we do not organize the European energy sovereignty, and it's only possible via sustainable energy sources, then the poorest, the weakest in our society, they'll be at the losing end, because the rich ones, they'll manage to sort themselves in Europe or outside of Europe. But people who cannot move easily, who are bound by some job on site, by some industry, they have to come on board and be part of this change that results in better jobs and sustainable jobs. And the nice thing is it's possible. It's not even that far away. Things are changing so quickly. But we need to guarantee to organize that at the European level. Investments, the necessary investments for this, have such a scope that not even Germany can do it by itself. And this is why we need to make sure that it will be embarked on at the European level. If we want to have a sustainable energy for batteries in Europe, and this is what we want, we're doing it, then we need 10, 20, 30 billion of euros as investment. And it's not possible for one state or one industry in a given country. If we want to make sure to have a chips industry in Europe, then it's also about 10, 20, 100 billion of euros of investments. You know, if I can be a bit generalizing here at the moment. But all this is possible. We have everything we need to make this come true, especially if we rely on circular economy. Our immediate task, and then I'll get to the end of my speech, is to build up a project in the coming days and months that can show our citizens that a change is possible in energy supply. Repower EU, this is the proposal. First is save more, reduce consumptions. The goal is now not 9%, but 13% of reduction until 2030. Secondly, extend our industries for renewable energy, not 40, but 45% of renewable energies until 2030. And thirdly, we need to make sure pipeline gas, LNG, needs to be bought from other countries in order to supplement Russian gas, in order to substitute. We do not necessarily need to enter into long binding contracts with other countries, but we need to offer other countries to join our projects for a hydrogen economy. This is going to happen, this industry. We're going to need so much hydrogen in Europe, and at the same time, we'll need a lot of electricity. So we will never have this autonomous capacity to produce enough hydrogen here. So that's a huge potential also for the development of Africa, hydrogen. If we just think about it for 2 minutes, what the potentials are, photovoltaic systems, wind energy, they will have so much more energy. 600 million of Africans do not have any energy right now, but they will all be electrified. And they have more electricity. They will have more electricity than they need, and they can convert it to hydrogen. And this can be part of our long-term sustainability energy strategy. I believe in this, and I think it can happen more quickly than we think. But we should not lose confidence in our ability to do so. For Social Democrats, the most important thing is that we can prove day after day that we will leave no one behind. Everybody can join and be part of this. Those who struggle most, most people don't even live in insulated apartments. These are the poorest people, and we need to prove that we can quickly insulate these buildings, that we can supply them with photovoltaic system. And if we prove that day after day, then we will be rewarded with the confidence that a good future is possible for everybody. And if we do not prove that day after day, then those who promise something and regress to the past, they will be dominant, in the 60s and the 70s. The situation wasn't so nice for women and other groups, but these right-wing movements, they pretend as if those were the glorious days, the 60s and 70s. No, we need to say that there is an alternative nowadays, and it can only be done in solidarity. Otherwise, it's not credible, and people will not be part of it and come on board. Thanks so much.
Ja, vielen Dank. Das ist, glaube ich, wirklich ein ganz wichtiger Punkt.
Thanks so much. I think that's a crucial aspect. There is no contradiction between social justice and ecology. But when we look at Europe, the EU, sometimes it's hard to understand because in the past, the EU tried more to reduce barriers for economic competitiveness. So what can the European Union do to emphasize the social aspect of the transformation? Well, for example, you mentioned the automotive industry. 3 years ago, I was so much having arguments with them. That's only 3 years ago. They told us, no, 2025 is not possible, it's too fast, it's impossible. But now, actually, I'd say they're all on board. They have understood that for the industries, it's the best path forward. And that means also for the employees, it's going to be the best path forwards. So many jobs are going to be created in this area. So many more cheaper electric vehicles will be sold with cheaper batteries. I think this is going to create jobs. And I can expect that the German metalworker union will understand that too, right? So this is what we need to talk about. What we're doing is creating a European industry. These 440 million of citizens, we need them in order to be able to invest for shaping this transformation in the coming years. But let me emphasize again, we need Europe, the whole of it. Germany cannot do it alone. And the automotive industry is not only German, it's pan-European, it's globalized. And we need to make sure, we need Europe for that, to have some form of understanding, perception, perspective of China that is based on reality, but where we do not close doors too quickly, and we can only do so as Europeans. A single state can never achieve that. So this is what we should be offering. At the European level, the Social Democrats have been fighting for that for a long time. Now at the European level, we have a decision at the European level on minimum wage. So that's a very clear sign at the European level. We want to make sure that there is no dumping on the labor markets. So I can continue talking about that for hours. But the most important thing is we need to shape this transformation in a pan-European way. We're too small as individual member states to do so. Thanks so much. Doing it jointly, if we talk more about the crisis and, with the supply of Russian gas already being reduced, it's become a very urgent, delicate matter. So it's really important to show solidarity. Will we manage to pass this test? Well, every crisis also holds its opportunities, and if we do not understand that as responsible politicians, then I do not know when else we would be doing it. The energy question is a tremendously important question for our cohesion. As a social democrat, I would say it's an integral ingredient for welfare and security state and system. Frans, let us be concrete. How, for example, do we shape tomorrow's mobility, tomorrow's housing? These are issues that affect everybody immediately, directly. And if we ask too much, people will be angry with us. But let me give you an example. In the past month, the Higher Administrative Court in Lüneburg forbid the construction of 3 windmills because the view of an old historical windmill was impaired. Then it shows what challenges we are still facing. I hope that the Zeitenwende will be taken seriously in the traffic light coalition. It wasn't possible in the big coalition we had before, but I think now we will really put maximum focus on renewable energies. And sometimes it's not even easy to negotiate these conflicts between the industries and the environmental associations. Otherwise, we will not manage this transition. And Frans, you're here. sustainable energy policies, we have to talk about this in future. For me, gas and nuclear energy, it's not sustainable. So all priority needs to be on renewable energies, and we shouldn't take any interim measures.
Interessante Frage. Denn wir geben natürlich.
That's an interesting question. Of course, we do not give any European funding to nuclear energy. Let me just be clear on that. But there was a political compromise between France and Germany. France, nuclear energy; Germany, gas. Russian gas filled our supplies, but it made us also lazy.
Eine Rückkehr geben wird.
And now we have to get used that we will not take a step back. Everybody who believes that after the war we will be able to import gas from Russia again, no, this is wrong thinking. We cannot afford this dependency anymore.
Dass wir viel schneller umschalten müssen.
So we have to be much quicker in our transitioning. All investments need to be geared towards renewable energies. This is what we need to do at the European level. But we also need to convince the energy industry and the providers, because there's still a lot of investment in oil and gas, in traditional energies. You know, these providers for oil and gas, they say, well, we have our portfolio for investments and we doubled the investments for renewable energies from 2 to 4. We doubled it, but the portfolio should be 60 or 70% for renewable energies. So we shouldn't step back and be dependent again on cheap fossil gas. That's also very dangerous at the political level. So Europe has embarked on this path, has very ambitious plans, but is only responsible for 8% of global emissions. Just to put that into perspective, this morning we heard that Europe and Germany should have a claim to leadership. Mrs. Göpel, how can the European path be a source of inspiration at the global level? How much can we take up a leadership role? So again, I would ask, what is a center? If we agree with this idea of political centers that are attractive, what can the center do? Is it just about developing a model for prosperity and for wealth and focus on that? Yes. But what is actually thinkable at the global level, at the globalized level, with this idea of sustainability? We said all of us are developing countries. No single country has already managed for the population to achieve the social goals or to do it in a way that isn't cost-intensive when it comes to planetary boundaries, you know, and using resources that belong to other countries. And this is why I still advocate the Green Deal. I think it's going to be very tricky when it comes to individual measures, but I think we need to be firm with our stance, with this political compass, and formulate it clearly. You know, we were talking about these effects. Short term, it's going to be uncomfortable. You know, we need investments, we need retraining. It's going to be uncomfortable with many regards. It's going to shake us all up. So the question is, how can we focus on what we can gain in a mid-term perspective, in a middle run? I think security, again, is a core issue that we need to think further. A high level of prosperity with little use of resources. This is a promise also for our future security, also for this continent. And the next thing, ensuring quality. From businesses, I have representatives from engineers or agricultural businesses that say, I want to do this better, also the care sector. We force people to offer inferior products because this is what the market wants, but people could produce much better, and this has an effect on people. So if we tell these people we're going to change the market structures and make sure you can produce better products or offer better services, you know, from industries, manufacturing, or service and care, and a lot of people are really afraid, what can I do if I do not have enough money? Who's going to take care of me? So these issues are at the core of things. We need to guarantee high qualitative products and services, and we need not a growth pact, but a sustainability pact. And this is my last point. This increases our degree of freedom. If we manage this transition process, then we will have more at the end. And renewable energies are the best example. We need an energy system that is decentralized, resilient, relies on a lot of different sources, it's more participatory, it's because it's decentralized, and that also reduces costs for fuels. That means electricity prices can be reduced and diminished, and that's the same thing for agriculture. If our soils are better, then we have access to more resources, and then they will filter more carbon dioxide as well. So, we need to go through this shorter, difficult period, and that's very problematic for election terms, and this is why we need to be creative. How can we protect this mid-term perspective? This is why we're talking about roadmaps or the Climate Protection Act. How can we focus on these objectives at the midterm range? How can they be a point of reference for what we do nowadays? And if that's not enough, then we need to be more creative. If we need the Constitutional Court, that's unfortunate. I would love for political programs to do so.
Very briefly, one brief remark. If we buy more gas, coal, and oil, the price will go up. When we buy more sustainable or renewable energy, the price will go down. It's quite interesting for investors. They know that the investments in sustainable energy will repay much more quickly, and they lead to more calm in society because they lead to lower prices for the citizens. And when it comes to traditional forms of energy, when we need more, the price will go up. This is the way the market works. So you just have to think about that, what it means for the investments that we have to make. Thank you very much. Now I would like to seize the opportunity to include Johanna and ask her what questions have we received online. Thank you very much, Julia. I've got one question for the panel. When will the Zeitenwende come when it comes to investments in infrastructure and energetic renewal? Well, I think this has already been answered in part, but I'm not sure. Matthias, maybe you want to answer it. Well, we have set up a billion euro fund in Germany, the Climate Fund, which is supposed to fund exactly that. However, the thing is that currently we are debating in this coalition how should we, for example, focus on insulation and renewable energies. And some say the price will go up. We need affordable housing, and we should rather strengthen the renewable segment. I think we have to do both things at once, and I'm sure we will decide upon a good thing before the summer break. But now the important thing is that from the European level, we have to send out the signal that it's neither gas nor nuclear. It is the renewable energies. This is the key from my point of view. And from it derives the issue of buildings, mobility of the future, and also the industry of the future. Because in the global context, our products will can only be sold or marketed if this global footprint is right, if we do it right. And moreover, this is my experience since the last climate conference. We will only be able to convince others when we go to our own limits, the limits that are acceptable to us. I will never forget how someone from Botswana told me, when you come around with your solar panels, it's like new imperialism from our point of view, because you want to have a lot of money for it. So our coal is much cheaper than that. If we do not overcome this thinking and build clear bridges to the other continents, and this brings me back to Lars again, we will need the United Nations, but next to it, we will need to set up alliances with Brazil, South Africa, Indonesia, and others in order to not only set an impulse by the nation state or based on the nation state. In the traffic light coalition, I'm sure we will see further investments and further discussions, and those who speak of freedom energy also have to make the necessary investments, but the money is available, and I hope that over the next 3 years we will make massive headway here what hampered us was the old thinking, but due to the new situation in Russia, we now know that if we really want to become independent, in order to quote Franz Hals, the sun is not sending a bill. Of course, we have to invest, but it will make us more independent. And this is an idea that we have to implement now. Now, I would like to bring up new aspects into the discussion. I mean, it's not only about the transformation, but also democracy. So not only within the different countries we see more populist movements, but throughout Europe we see more and more countries who are governed by an autocratic or populist government. How do we deal with this challenge? Frans Timmermans, isn't this a time where security is at risk, our livelihood is at risk, or the way of life rather is at risk? So will these populist movements be on the rise even further? Well, I think if we have European regulations, we have to implement them. And the European Parliament is speaking clearly about it, and the European Commission likewise, but in the Council, the member states are not really prepared to critically deal with other member states. This is actually the area where we see the problems. And, for example, when it comes to Hungary and Orban, if we want to keep them with us and give them room on their own so that they behave better. No. Well, the CDU, the conservative group in the parliament, the EPP, have been wrong over years. And also Merkel has been wrong. When the member states do not stick to the rules, otherwise they will face consequences. This could be said by the Parliament or the European Commission, but the member states will protect each other. The member states have to say this as well, that everyone has to stick to the rules. And another aspect is that the citizens are still convinced of these politicians. So obviously, what we have to offer is not that convincing. So how can we make sure that these citizens are interested once again in our ideas? We have to show that we really show solidarity. One problem of the autocrats is that they cannot deliver, and because they cannot deliver, they look for scapegoats. These can be domestic or foreign scapegoats, and over years they can act as if in Kiev, for example, there's a Nazi government and there's a genocide against the Russians, which is bullshit, of course, but when you prepare people over a long period of time, for example, over 10 years for it, then they believe it. So autocrats cannot deliver and they need scapegoats, and then they are a danger, a threat to our democracies. We only have one alternative. We cannot do the same thing. This would mean that we violate our own values. We can only show that with concrete measures we can improve the lives of the citizens. This is the task of social democrats. And I can only win over people for a long-term project like the Green Deal when I can show short-term successes and short-term results. If I can show that with your heat pump, for example, or your solar panels, you have a lower energy bill than someone who does not have these technologies. And this will help us, and we will help the citizens to organize it. So the rent might be a little bit higher, but the energy bill might be lower. And if we can show this on a daily basis, step by step, then we will win back the minds of the people. But this is a very complicated and complex work, but it's the only path that we can go along.
Nun haben wir ja schon jetzt, und das haben Sie jetzt ja gerade angesprochen,
you already mentioned it, that already today we reach the limits of our capacity to act. When it comes to the principle of unanimity, for example, in Europe, when it comes to foreign policy, we have seen this, but still Europe remains attractive. And Lars Klingbeil has said this morning that attractiveness goes hand in hand with responsibility. And now the enlargement question is once again on the table. The Commission has given the candidacy status for proposed the candidacy status for Ukraine and Moldova. So the question once again goes to you: what does this mean for the capacity to act for Europe? How can we strike a balance here to remain capable of acting and enlarge at the same time? Well, just imagine, in 2004, we would have had this debate and said, no, we first have to deepen the integration in Europe, and only then will Poland and other countries be able to, to accede, to become a member. Then Putin would do to Poland what he's now doing to Ukraine. So sometimes history dictates us what to do and also our strategic position. So sometimes we have to take a step which is a little bit risky. This is what we did in 2004, and now we have to do it again. This does not mean that the Ukraine will become a member of the EU tomorrow, but it does mean that we will tell the citizens in Ukraine, you are fighting for our values, you are defending our Europe, you want to become part of our family. You are already a European country, so this gives you the right to apply for a EU membership. And we say, yes, under certain conditions, it will be possible. This is the only thing that Europe can say at the moment. And this is also morally right. This is what we have to say. We cannot neglect Ukraine at the moment when they want to become a member of the EU. And of course, they do know very well how difficult it will be and that it will take a long time, and they are ready to take the necessary steps. Then it is also contribution to the stability of Europe and also contribution to the change in Europe that we have to undertake, because Ukraine has a lot to offer, be it in the agricultural sector or in the industry, or be it in the components of the new industries. So everything is available in Ukraine. So it's not only a challenge for us, but for the European Union, it's also an opportunity. And if we can make sure that they successfully fight against corruption, have independent media and independent courts, that everyone can develop freely there, then this is a huge contribution to our own stability, but it's also what is morally right. Well, a group of young Ukrainians wrote a letter last week to the young generation in Germany, and they said and wrote what they are fighting for in Ukraine at the moment. It's a very long list. I would briefly like to summarize it. They are fighting for an open Europe and Europe in security, a Europe in diversity, a digital, environmentally friendly and just Europe. So are we still coming up to these key values, Matthias? Well, at least the plans that the European Commission has submitted go into the right direction. But the implementation, I think, can only be achieved if we have the necessary empathy also within the European Union. Empathy for the fact that the situation of the different member states in Europe is quite different, also in terms of the energy sector. And when it comes to Eastern European countries, we will have to offer bridges. When, for example, the emissions trade in the field of housing takes its full impact, there are people who are living in many houses that are badly insulated. So this is why this social mitigation is very important. It's a very important aspect that we have to keep in mind equally as our very ambitious objectives. But I also want to make clear at this conference that the European Union is only one thing and the enlargement is only one thing. But the global sustainability goals and also the Paris Climate Agreement can only be achieved if we continue the idea of the Paris Climate Agreement and the idea of the global sustainability goals despite this horrible war of aggression. Otherwise, we will not achieve our goals. So despite all necessary discussion about deterrence, etc., this idea should be a key part of an event like this. Deterrence is meant to deter other people or aggressors, but the planet is very small when it comes to climate issues. So we have to mitigate this current situation. We will need China, we will need Russia to do so, we will need Saudi Arabia. So everything that was overcome in 2015 with Paris is still applicable, is still valid. And after this war of aggression, of course, we are faced with an even bigger challenge. But this means that it's be more important that the Social Democrats find an answer here, because we are driven by the idea of solidarity, and this means negotiation and also cooperation. I think this aspect will also play a role in the next panel when we will talk about new alliances and a new world order. Ms. Göpel, in September, your new book will be published. We can do differently, and the publishing house says that this is a book which is encouraging and inspiring. So what is inspiring or encouraging after this discussion from your point of view? Well, I think the progress compass needs to be the socio-ecological trade-ins, and we have to find political and economic instruments for it. Then I, of course, would be very satisfied already, because these are the man-made institutions, and when time changes, and the German word Zeitenwende, I think, is a bit strange, because a Wende would mean that we go backward, we go further and progress. So if there's such a time, then it does not make sense to remain conservative in terms of our structures and in terms of our narratives, but we have to rethink it. And this is what I try to say time and again today. What are the main values that we want to uphold? What are the main messages? How can we apply it? And always keep in mind the impact. And a sustainability strategy, for example, could also be taken serious by a German government for a change. And then it would be very inspiring. I mean, of course, I'm also living in a bubble, but I get so much feedback from other people, from different events, where people really want politicians to assume responsibility here, and especially at the municipal level. We have to deal with these fears. So the self-effectiveness is what psychologists, for example, try to foster time and again. So we have to try to, once again, connect to the living reality of the people on the ground, and we have to support them. And this is why I was very interested in this instrument next to the Just Transition Fund at the European level, so the support or just transition governance. This is very interesting, because the way in which we organize the process is very important, whether they can generate trust once again, or whether people feel deceived when there's the fourth Citizen Council developing nice recommendations, or the Future Conference, for example, that you brought up. They all put a lot of effort in it, and the experts that speak there put a lot of effort in it, but then it is put into a drawer because the political reality is focused on completely different aspects, so not good at all. So my wish would be that if you want the people to integrate and participate, then you have to take them seriously. Thank you very much. Today's discussion is very encouraging also from my point of view. We were asked to look ahead, and I think this is what we have done with this panel. It was very nice and interesting, and enjoy the further discussion.